Welcome back to another episode with Q&A with TNC. I am Tim, sitting here in Tampa, Florida, and we got Christian on the other side of the world in Thailand. Your evening, my morning. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, buddy. I'm doing good. Looking forward to this podcast.
Wonderful.
And I love technology, right? We can do this and be halfway around the world and act like we're just sitting next door to each other.
It really continues to blow my mind. It really isn't a fantastic thing. So, well, guys, today we're coming at you with a really important topic on stewardship. Now, we've been in the stewardship series, and we have covered all kinds of different topics on stewardships. Go back, listen to season 2, starting at the beginning. But today's an important one, especially for men. It's going to be the stewardship of your body and of rest. You know, Christian, there couldn't be... I know for me, and I have 4 kids, full-time job. We're busy. We're doing all kinds of stuff. I know if I don't get rest, I'm in trouble. Right. And the Bible is very clear, though, about the fact of the importance of rest in your life in order for you to survive. And what's interesting to me is, we're not infinite like God. We need rest. We need the ability to rejuvenate our bodies. We're spirit, but we're inside this fleshly body. So how do we do that effectively? And man, for me, I just really enjoy how the Bible lays it out. The Bible's from the beginning. We can look at all the way back in Genesis. God took the seventh day to rest, but he didn't sit there and take it to rest for him. He took it to rest for us. And one of the great scriptures that I always like to think about too is the one where Jesus is talking. The scripture goes where he's one Sabbath, he's going through the grain fields and he's with his disciples. And he ended up he has this interaction with the Pharisees, I believe it is, and they're having this conversation about him because they were picking grains on the Sabbath, and everyone started, they became uproar because it wasn't what they were supposed to be doing on the Sabbath, and you can't be working. And Jesus says something very, very profound but direct. He says, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even over the Sabbath. And there's a lot to unpack there, Christian, but the bottom line really is that God created the Sabbath for us, and we've got to be good stewards of that Sabbath. What do you think?
Yeah, I love it. God created the Sabbath for us. But man, as you're sharing it, I'm just thinking to myself, so easy to read, easy to agree with, to put into practice. There's so many things that can keep us from putting this into practice. And yet
Yep.
we're not even just talking about Sabbath or rest for the body, but what did God create? Body, soul, and mind. So how are we taking rest emotionally?
Yeah.
How are we taking rest spiritually? So let's say, we're going to deal with the first part, which is rest for the body. But I also want our listeners to be thinking, but what does it also mean to have rest for your mind and rest for your spirit?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think it's going to be a great topic today. And so, yeah, let's kick off with what does it mean to have rest for the body? And, it's interesting because I was at church a couple of weeks ago and they kind of talked about this a little bit. And we live in a completely different time than they did back in the Bible days, right? I always think to myself, it'd be easier to rest back in the Bible days, right? There's no social media. There's no pressure. There's just daily life in your village. And it's basically, once the sun goes down, you kind of have to rest. There's no electricity.
Yeah,
there's no internet. There's no
you got candlelight, baby.
Right. There's no nightclubs. There's no restaurants. There's no movie theaters to go to. Like when it's dark, it's bedtime and you're kind of forced to rest. And then you stay rested, right? Even if you can't sleep, you can't wake up and go watch TV. You can't scroll on your phone. You just sit and toss and churn while the crickets are doing their thing. And then of course, you get up, sun up, and then you get back to work. So I'm always struggling with this because I think, man, again, it's probably easier to rest back then, but how do we make time for rest today when the world is just nonstop 24/7? New York, the city that never sleeps, right?
Yep.
Tokyo, one of the biggest, most well-lit cities in the entire world, and even if we don't live in a city, just information, entertainment, and distraction are the temptations that we face. And so how do we navigate rest in this current state that we live in?
I think it's a great question. And I think first we need to step back and go, okay, well, what's the importance of it? If we are going to get burnt out physically, what is that going to lead to, right? We're going to lead to probably poor decision making. It's probably going to lead to eventually getting sick. It's going to lead to being in a poor emotional state. It's interesting how God created us because he created us body, soul, spirit, like you talked about, our body, soul, mind, and they all play together. And so the better rested we are physically, the better we are mentally, the better we are spiritually. It's funny in my household sometimes with the four kids running around, and my wife and I, we joke about having to monitor people's blood sugar because people get cranky when they get hungry, man. People get cranky when they when they get tired. And it's so much more difficult sometimes to focus on what we need to do spiritually when we don't have those things taken care of in our lives. And so when it comes to being able to do this and do this effectively, especially for the body and for your own physical body, there's important things. We need to understand how to live healthy. We need to understand how to eat healthy. We understand how to put good fuel in your body, because hey, listen, eating a good piece of fruit is a lot better than eating a candy bar. A candy bar tastes great, but you're going to pay for it in about, an hour when you have that sugar crash. You just got to be careful about how that's done. And we live in the information age where, Christian, it is so easy to find out what is healthy and what isn't. It's not,
Right.
this isn't
Right.
something where we can plead, ignorance anymore. And so what do we need to do from a physical standpoint is I subscribe to what and Jesus did. Jesus took a Sabbath. He took a rest. He would go and pray. He would separate himself from the madness or the busyness around him. And I love what you said because it is true. This was easier. I truly believe it was. It was easier in Jesus' day. It was easier for the Israelites. And so for us it becomes a lot more of a deliberate thing we have to do. And one of the things we've started doing in our household is actually looking at Friday night into Saturday as a time of actual physical rest. And we can't always do it, right? And we're held to different standards than the Jews are, right? As Gentiles, we're not commanded to to keep the Sabbath like they are, but it is in the Ten Commandments. So how much honoring do we want to give toward God? And some of these things it's different. Like my mentor, his rest, if you will, isn't just doing nothing, isn't sitting there watching Netflix or watching a TV show or watching golf. His rest is actually going out and doing something physical, as far as not work, but maybe going out playing volleyball with his friends. So we need the physical rest. I think part of it too is really listening to our bodies, but really getting inside of God's rhythm. Like you have 6 days to go out there and get after it, but you have to rest for a day, depending on what that looks like. And rest also has a lot to do with how well you sleep. How are we going to take that one day a week to make sure that, hey, I'm not hitting my alarm clock getting up at 5 a.m. to go accomplish something? Like, let's go ahead and ease into the day. And that's one of the things that me and my wife really, really try to do is to have that one day where we can ease into it. Now, again, this wasn't as always easy, but now that the kids are, 3, 6, 9, and 12, it has become a bit easier to make sure that we get the rest that we need, that we're biblically commanded to. Because at the end of the day, Christian, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to accomplish being more effective for the kingdom. I want to be better at being a dad, better at being a husband, better at being an employee, better at being a business owner, or whatever, my vocation and calling is. But I can't do that unless I have some structured, good rest in, because I've been on the other side of that, right? I've run and run and run and run, and your body will eventually make you rest if you do not rest. And that's just the way that God has created us. And it's interesting because we have that choice. And this is how he operates in many areas of our life, which is kind of funny to think about it, right? Like, you will eventually have to do what I've called you to do in this area, or there will be discipline because of it. And so, man, that's what I subscribe to. I don't know, how things are over in your world in Thailand, but and you're in a different situation, no kids, married, but how does it look
Right.
like for you? Because it doesn't mean
Right.
you don't have your plate full. Sometimes it means without kids you get more stuff going on. So tell me what you think.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's good because as I'm listening to you share, I like the word that you brought up. You said our structure. And I think for most of us, myself included, and I think our listeners as well, we actually run our day based on a structured calendar. I don't know many of us that just kind of wake up all any day, every day, and be like, well, you know, not really sure what I'm going to do today. We'll just kind of see how it goes. That's just not true, right? Most of us have a structure. We know what's happening. We know what's happening before lunch. We know what we're eating for lunch. We know what we're doing for dinner. We know what
Yep.
the nighttime looks like. So if we use that as kind of the way that we look at our day, we have a structured calendar routine. Then here are two principles to consider with your everyday routine. Where do you have boundaries, and where do you have margins?
That's good.
The boundaries keep you from being overworked. The margins allow you to rest between your commitments. Okay, so if we all have a calendar, and I do, you do, we all do, where in that calendar do you have boundaries saying, I won't work past this time. I won't start work before this time. I will take this break at this time, because the Sabbath is that one day where the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Even the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. We have that day of rest, but out of 7 days, 7 minus 1 is what? 6. So you still got
Yep.
6 other days to work out this principle of rest, of stewardship of your body.
Yep.
And so where do we need boundaries, and how do we put in margins? So for an example, I have a particular boundary that I won't start work before a set time, because that allows me to have a consistent pattern of sleep. Unless, of course,
There
I
you go.
can't fall asleep, but that's a different podcast for a different day.
That's right.
But I've got a set amount of time for how long I want to sleep and feel rested. But throughout my day, I've got appointments and commitments and responsibilities. And I can tend to put things back to back to back to back to back, so that at the end of the day, I'm like, man, I got done 9 meetings, but I
Yep.
only had like 5 minutes between each meeting. That's going to make me feel exhausted physically,
Agreed.
emotionally, in every way. So now I've become better over the last couple of years about having margins between my responsibilities. Instead of
Mm,
running around like my mother used to say, as a chicken without its head on, have some margins that represent the wisdom that I've learned from experience in life. If I have a meeting, I've learned that I need around a 30 to 40-minute margin before my next meeting, if possible.
that's
That way I
great.
can process what I've just done and then prepare myself for what is to come. If I can't take a 30 or 40-minute margin, a 15-minute margin. But I can't just go from ending at 3 and then starting my next meeting at 3:05. I've got to have
Yep.
some margins, and yet also I have to have some boundaries. So I would say I think that's one of the best ways that we can really apply this stewardship of our body and physical rest, is by being willing to create boundaries and being willing to follow margins.
I love it, man. And I think when you think about rest, and this is an important point, and when you think about how Jesus did this, the Hebrew mindset was to operate from rest, not to run to rest. In the Western mindset over here, it's, man, we're working for Friday, baby. Let's get as fast, let's work for Friday and then we can rest. No, it's like, no, you're supposed to be honoring God with your work so that you can get to the point of rest to then go back to work. So we want to operate from a position of, man, I'm coming out of my rest ready to go. And when you change that mindset as a Christian, man, it changes the game, because now I'm not dreading, oh man, I got a case of the Mondays. I got to go back to work. It's no, I'm getting the opportunity to go back into the marketplace because I've now rested. I've taken that time of rest, right? And it could be the Friday to Saturday. It could be the Saturday to Sunday. Again, as Gentile Christians, we're not held to the same standard like you see in Israel. Well, I hear these stories about when people go to Israel, man, everything stops on Friday. Friday at sundown, nothing is happening. I mean, there's nobody on the streets. There's not a car running. It is part of their culture, but it's part of their calling. And I think it's one of the coolest things because they
Wow.
take that time to say, man, I'm ready to meet with God to rejuvenate myself.
Yep.
And I think we
Yep.
can't miss that point either. Like, we're not just sitting there on the couch resting and doing nothing. No, we're purposely meeting with God. And that was the whole entire purpose of how can I rejuvenate myself? It was that idea that this is the culmination of the week, and then it was spending time in relationship with God and your family to renew and rejuvenate your body and mind. And that's awesome. I think it's one of the coolest things. One of the things that we did is we bought this. It's a great organization. I'll plug them here. It's ffoz.org, First Fruits of Zion. They create things for Christians that want to learn how, from Jesus's perspective as a Jew, would have done Shabbat, would have done the Sabbath. And so it's pretty cool. We bought this book, and the booklet kind of runs through a messianic perspective or a Christian perspective on how you would run Sabbath. And so we started putting that in there with our kids on Friday night. And man, it's been a true blessing. And so, that's kind of where I'm at when it comes to almost the totality of it, because now we can pivot a little bit to say, okay, we've got the body, we've got the soul, we got the mind. And I think what I know I can be guilty of is, how do I make sure that even though I'm resting my body, I'm doing that? How do I try to turn my brain off? Because your brain, your mind also needs that level of rest. And I don't know about for you, Christian. I get your impact, your feedback on this. But when I'm thinking about turning off my mind, it's been really challenging for me in my life. I'm a type A go-getter personality, so I'm always thinking
Right,
about
right.
things. But you said it best. You said boundaries. Where can I put in that boundary? And I have to really have my mind set on, listen, I'm not going to look at an email. Now I have a job where I'm responsible during weekends. However, I don't have to be the one going to look for it. I can allow those things to come to me in the event that I need to take action on a particular issue. But no, I'm going to put in that boundary because I don't need to be thinking. I need to be focusing on my relationships to rejuvenate my mind because those are the things that God has given me. I don't know. What do you think?
I love that we're coming to this part of how to have emotional or mental rest. And first off, I think probably not living in the times that we live in would help. Our times are
That's right.
crazy.
It's
Our
true.
times are, wow. I mean, this is such a crazy time to be alive. There's just so much coming at us that can cause us to be overwhelmed, scared, fearful, frustrated, depending on your perspective. Maybe some people are really happy at this point in time. I mean, there's just so many things that can make you feel a wide variety of emotions. But we're not talking about emotions. We're talking about our thoughts and our emotional or mental burdens. And so when I think of this idea of the stewardship of rest, I also think about emotional rest and peace. God
Yeah,
promises peace, does he not? Right?
he
He
does.
says, you don't have a spirit of fear, but I want a power of love and of a sound mind.
Mind.
So most of us have burdens. If you're parents, you're probably worried about your kids. You're probably, what are my kids going to grow up to do? How are we going to afford this? How are we going to provide for this? If you're a
Yep.
single person, you might be thinking about how to pay your bills. When am I going to get married? Am I going to get promoted? We have so many things running through our mind. And like you, Tim, I also often lay in bed at night and my mind just doesn't shut off. My body wants to rest. My eyes are closed, but the mind is racing like I'm in an F1 race, going around a track
Yeah.
somewhere in Monaco. So, how to do that? And so, let me just share with our listeners. Here's something that I try to reflect on, and it's these 4 points. One is when I need rest emotionally, when I need rest mentally, when I'm burdened by just life and people and relationships and work or whatever it is. I first remember what Jesus tells us, I think in Matthew. Come to me, all you who are burdened. Number one, Jesus
Hmm.
invites us to come to him with what's on our mind, with what's keeping us from resting.
That's really
Two,
good.
I go back to the book of James. I think it's in James chapter 1 or chapter 2. God says, if any of you lack wisdom, ask me. So Jesus reminds us to come to him with our burdens. Two, God says, come to me and ask me for wisdom. I'll give it to you. So then I'm like, okay, I don't have to figure this out on my own. I can come to God and ask him for wisdom. Then the third one is we read in Corinthians that there's nothing that we can't handle without God, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I can't handle without God, but there's nothing I can't handle with God, and he'll be with me. And that gives me a peace that whatever I'm going through, whatever burden I'm facing, whatever rest I'm not having emotionally, God is aware of that, and he's not absent, and he's not watching me fail or flail. He's with me. And then finally I come back to the book of James at point number 4, that everything that we go through, everything is to refine us and to draw us closer to God.
Mm,
And so when I have those emotional burdens, when I have those mental burdens, by coming to Jesus and by coming to God and asking for wisdom and giving my burdens to Jesus and knowing that God is with me, that I don't have to face it alone, it helps me grow in my faith.
it's
It
good.
helps it helps refine me, and it helps mature me in my walk with God. And so that's how I find stewardship with rest for my mind.
That's really good. It's interesting to me too because I'm sitting here listening to you and thinking about, man, what is it that I have been able to grow in this area that brings me that peace, right? We think about, was it John 16:33 talks about in this life you will have trouble, but take heart, for I've overcome the world. That one runs through my mind, my peace I have, my peace I give to you. And so there's this concept, especially as men, like, hey, we want this. I think intrinsically we're after being able to actually get this rest and have this peace in our life. And I can't be there unless I understand the promises of Scripture, like you just went over. And the one
Hmm.
that really sticks out to me too for a man is that Romans 8:28 verse, right? That all things are working for the good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. I mean, when I'm struggling mentally, when I'm struggling with a situation in my life, when I'm asking and seeking wisdom, man, I can hang my hat on, am I qualifying myself for all things to work for the good. And I think sometimes it's a hard conversation for us as men to sit there and go, man, I know I need to rest. I know I need to get myself mentally in the space I need to be in, but what are my requirements for that? And what is God calling me to do? And he's also, a couple of things, right? He's calling us to Shabbat. He's calling us to Sabbath, but he's also calling us to understand that we're his children. Like he's on our side. And I can sit here and know, man, everything is working for the good because I do two things. I love God and I'm called according to his purpose. And there's a huge word there. And that word is being able to submit as a man, to be vulnerable and to go, you know what? I give this to you, God. Last night at our men's group, we had an off campus night, so we ran over and got tacos. It was Taco Tuesday, baby. You just can't beat Taco Tuesday, right? And so I
Taco
ran from
Tuesday is
baseball
always a good
practice.
Tuesday.
Oh man, it's just pure ministry. It's wonderful. And so I ran from practice with my son over there, and we have a guy who is in this weird limbo state at his job where he just got promoted, but they just get rid of his department all at the same time. So it was a very strange situation. And he just looked right at me and he just says, you know what? All things are working for the good. Like I'm totally trusting God. I'm totally walking this path right now of going, you know, I'm not 100% sure where my next two paychecks are coming from. And I got to tell you, Christian, he handled it a lot better than I would have, right? Because that's just a totally different space in his mind. But he is walking this out. He's going, you know, I know that this is what God wants me to do. I know that I love him and I know that I'm called according to his purpose. So I get to sit here and hold him to his promises. And I think sometimes as men, we get weirded out about, you know, holding God to his promises. Listen, he's big enough to handle that. He's big enough for you to go, here's a promise. I'm going to do my part and I'm expecting you to show up and you do your part. I think God grows our faith like that. And so part of our resting is also leaning into these promises and going, you know what, you've overcome the world. I get that. I can rest in that. And I can also rest in the fact that all things are working for the good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that's how you can start and entering into your emotional rest, going, you know what? God has got me. He's got me. He's got my family. He's got my extended family. Like he's got my job. He's got all of this stuff. And then when you get quiet and you can enter into that rest, then you can do two important things. God, what do you want me to know? And what do you want me to do? And when you can rest daily and you can enter into that rest for, you know, the one day a week, you can start asking some of these questions and you will be shocked at what God will say, here's what I want you to do. But it is so difficult to do that unless you can get to those places of rest. And just like everything, you know, one of the things we always talk about on this podcast, Christian, is there's a reward for this. Men, we're wired for reward, right? So what reward am I going to get for resting? There's great reward. Not only you're going to feel physically and mentally better, but I truly believe you come out of those with greater clarity. And sometimes this world tries to bury you as a man and not give you clarity and keep you distracted. And man, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but for me, that's
Yeah.
where it's at for me. That's where
Yeah.
it's at. We got to start with that baseline, you know?
Yeah. And there is a reward for trusting God and for coming to him. As you said, there's that clarity. And then I would just add the word peace, you
No,
know?
it's huge.
It's hard to get close to Jesus and feel chaos. I'll tell you that.
That's right. That's right.
Right. Whether it's physical chaos in the world that you live in, or whether it's emotional, mental chaos of the things that are burdening your heart and your mind. When Jesus says, come to me, he offers, as you said, clarity
Mm-hmm.
and he offers peace.
Yep.
And peace is the antidote to a world of chaos and the emotional chaos that is ready to enter our hearts and minds. And so let's stay close to Jesus. Let's stay close to his word, his ways, and his will, as you reminded us. And we can
Mm-hmm.
experience the peace that what? Surpasses all
All
understanding.
understanding.
And that peace is the peace that gives us not just rest physically, it gives us rest emotionally and mentally as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a great way to wrap this one up. And you know, it doesn't have to be complicated, guys. Like we went into a lot of stuff today, but it doesn't really have to be that complicated. Start small. God will honor your small steps. He'll honor the fact that, hey, I tried to rest for an hour. You know, I tried this, I tried that, you know, and we got two sides of the coin here. We get the guy that doesn't want to rest, who wants to run and burn out, and we get the guy who doesn't want to do anything either. right? And so we got to be careful that we're not on one of those two extremes. God didn't sit there and say, hey, I want you to take 6 days of rest and 1 day of work. No, that's not how this works. He purposely laid it out there and said, we got 6 days for you to go out there and build my kingdom. And I think when we change our perspective on this sometimes, man, it changes everything. Okay, I got 6 days to go out there and run hard for God and to build his kingdom, 1 day to rest and seek him, seek relationships, seek renewal, and to get that body, soul, spirit, or body, soul, mind renewed. And it all ties together, right? Like when you go to renew your body and you do it at that time of rest and you're seeking God for your soul, your mind is going to get rest. It has to. There's no other way around it. But if you don't do that, it's gonna fall apart. So my closing thoughts are: start small. We're not here looking for you to switch your entire life up, but Christian brought some really good practical things about, hey, build in margin, build in boundaries. Don't allow people just to invade your rest, because the world will try and do that. Don't be afraid to put your stinking phone away. Put it away. Stop looking at it. Listen, Facebook is going to live on for the next day if you don't check it. It's going to be okay. And we got to prioritize what's more important to us, and that's our relationships and our family. It's the people that are right in front of us, not people that are on some virtual platform on the other side of the world that wants to tell you about how to bake a cake. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not important to me. Like,
Are you talking about me when you mentioned Facebook? I'm just kind of feeling a little
are you
personal
feeling
conviction
convicted,
here.
Christian?
I might feel a little conviction here, buddy. No, it's
I
good
actually
though. It's good though,
I
right?
did not have you in mind. I had myself in mind because I have to walk away from my phone. And it's actually my brother-in-law that taught me this. It was so funny because some days I'm like, why does it take him 6 hours to respond to even a text or something like that? And he just said straight up, he goes, I'm on this thing all week. I put my phone somewhere sometimes on the weekends and I don't check it for hours. And I thought, oh my gosh, you're a genius.
Sounds like he has
An
boundaries and
absolute,
margins.
oh my gosh. And it's so
Sounds like he has
practical,
boundaries and
dude.
margins. Boundaries and
Yep.
margins. I think
And
that might
listen,
be our new catchphrase. Boundaries and margins.
boundaries and margins. sounds like a song.
Yeah, or
So that's my input, man.
yeah,
As we wrap this up, start small. God is going to reward your actions. He's going to reward the steps that you take. And just be ready. Be ready for the blessing that's going to come on the other side of this, because, man, rest is a blessing and it's important, and we got to be good stewards of this, guys, because at the end of the day, it makes us more effective in our calling as husbands, as child of God, as parent, as co-worker. And obviously I could go on and on, but I'll kick it to you for your final thoughts, Christian.
Oh, those are some great final thoughts, Tim. And I think we'll leave it with that, because that's a great way for our listeners to reflect on that final truth. It's a great word.
Awesome,
It's a
brother.
great word.
Well, again, you have been listening to Q&A with TNC. I am Tim down here in Tampa, and that is Mr. Christian over in Thailand. And we just covered stewardship of the Sabbath, or stewardship of body and rest. And guys, if you like this podcast, please share it. We're not here to be podcast famous around the world. We're here just to help men. We want to help men seek and walk in victory, and we try to hit topics that are going to do that. Episode 4 of the series was going over some questions, and so we encourage you, send more of your questions in. If you enjoy this podcast, we will get to them. And like that one, Christian, right? Episode 4, we dedicated an
That's
entire
right.
episode to handling some of those questions, and
That's right.
it was awesome. I really, really enjoyed that one. So we'll see you next time. Christian, I appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you too, my friend, and looking forward to our next episode, and looking forward to our listeners sending in their questions.
Amen to that. See you next time.